Welcome back everyone to Blender and Unreal Engine becoming a dungeon prop artist. Now this is where we left it off. Now I think what we need to discuss now is as we put it onto our renderer, we need to discuss basically the two types of renderer in Blender. There's actually more, but there's only two types that you're actually probably going to deal with. So the first one is Eevee renderer, and what this basically is like real-time rendering. So it's basically like what you would have in a games engine like Unreal Engine or something, or Unity or something like that. All right, so the next thing then I want to do is I want to actually show you the other one, which is cycles. So if we click on cycles, you will see that this is not real time, but the lighting is a ton better. Now this is important that you can see between them, because then you can decide which one you want to use when you're actually viewing your viewport in the render mode. And also when we come to the end of this, we will be rendering out all of our props in both Eevee and cycles. So let's look at cycles now. The Eevee renderer, by the way, there's not a lot that you need to do with it. The one thing you can do with Eevee renderer, for instance, if I come over here and I click on ambient occlusion, you will see that you get some really nice shadows already actually with it. Now, with the cycles render engine, it doesn't actually come with shadows or ambient occlusion, so we need to actually sort that out ourselves. Although in cycles, the actual lighting and things like that is really nice. So for instance, you can see now, because I've put this floor here, if I move this floor away, you can see those shadows disappear. And as I bring them up, we get more shadows because these are basically contact shadows. So it's really good for things like contact shadows. We'll go in depth and a little more into the options on Eevee Render Engine a little bit later on in the course. Now let's put this onto cycles once more. And what we'll do now is we'll actually sort out a few of these options. So the first thing I want to do is go to Edit, go to Preferences. And what I want to do is I want to go down to where it says System. And you will see at the moment, because I basically set up the default Blender, you can see at the moment I've got all of these options to put on. Now I'm going to click this one on. This is basically the new Cycles X. So it is rendering using Cycles X. You can have CUDA on as well, but I'm going to use this new one, which is Cycles X, as I say. I'm going to tick on both of my CPU and my GPU, and then I'm basically going to leave everything else as it is, apart from this memory and limit. So this is my undo steps. I tend to set this to 150 or something like that. And the reason I do it is because when I'm building the course, actually, there are times when I make a mistake and I have to go a long way back to actually fix it. So I tend to set this fairly high. Remember, every time you set, the higher you set this, the larger the file will be when you save it out. And the more cache data Blender will use as it's actually working, because it has to remember more undo steps. So just take that in mind. All right, so now we've set that up, we need to close this down. And then what we need to do is we need to come over and we need to put this onto my GPU. And the reason is that normally your GPU is much faster than your CPU. And then what I want to do is I also want to put this on experimental. And the reason I'm putting that on experimental is because Blender is using now Cycles X when we render this out. So it's important to actually put it on there. The next thing I want to do is I want to put my denoising on. And the reason is, at the moment, as you can see all these fireflies and noise and things like that. I want to smooth all that out. So I'm just going to put denoising on. And now you can see it's much smoother. It takes a little bit of time to load up. But for me, working with cycles rather than Eevee is much better. Now you will notice that all of those contact shadows have disappeared. And that is the reason why we need to set up all of our materials with our ambient occlusion and things like that. All right, well, first of all, let's sort out our lighting. At the moment, is the lighting any good? What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this plane out. So I'm just going to press S, drag it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it onto the ground plane. So you can see ground plane down here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab 3 of my materials, also put them on the ground plane just to make sure everything's in the right space. Now you will notice that my table doesn't really have any shadows or anything like that at the moment. And that is because basically the HDRI we've brought in is not very high on the actual strength. So you can see our strength here, 0.680. Let's put it on something like 1. Turn that up, and now you can see we've got a few soft shadows like around here. Still not what I actually want. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring in a sun. And it's called a directional light or a sun. And it's also called an infinite light source. And the reason it's an infinite light source because it's not like a candle where it only gives so much light out, or a spotlight or something like that. they only go so far and then the actual light actually weakens. With an infinite light source, which is like our real sun, it actually goes on forever. So let's press Shift A, come down, bring in a sun, and there we go. Now we can see we've got some shadows. Now the problem here is that, of course, that you can see that as I bring this up, as it is an infinite light source, it won't get any weaker on the shadows. It will just actually keep the actual same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate it. So R, X, rotate it a little bit, and then RZ, rotate it a little bit, and now we've actually got some nice shadows on there. So we've got a really, really nice setup now. It's really nice and bright, and now you can actually mess around turning down the HDRI, which will lower the outside of it. So it's up to you how actual bright you want it. I'm going to put this on 1 again, and I think that's actually probably going to be bright enough for what I need. Now, if you want to turn your sunlight down, come over to the right hand side where this little bulb is, and now you can turn the sunlight up or down or anything like that. I think for now 1 should be okay, and you can also mess around with the color, giving it some blue or yellow ambience depending on what sort of scene you're creating. I would leave this on just white at the moment, and the reason I'm doing that is because I want to see what these props look like before doing any kind of compositing with them or any kind of After Effects. All right, so now the next thing we need to discuss is this actual HDRI. Now you can see we do have a rotation on our HDRI. So you can see if I come to my sun, I can actually rotate the HDRI around, matching it up more or less in line with, if I can find it, where's my sun gone? There it is. With my actual, so I want basically to be around here. I want my sun to be around here, and the reason is because that is where my actual lighting is. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. And there we go. So that now is shining in the same place as the sun, meaning that our HDRI lighting is, matching where our sunlight is. All right, so now we need to move on to these options here. So we've got our, you can see here, HDRI, color, and gradient. Now, this setup comes with the HDRI, which is this background, and you can change that through importing HDRI into here. Just click this X, and then what you can do is you can actually bring in a new HDRI. Not going to do that. And then what we need to do is now we can change this over to a color. So let's change it over to a color, and you'll see now that it's changed to this background, and here is where you can change the color to whatever you want. I tend to put it on a gradient instead, so I'm going to put a gradient in there. And then I'm going to actually have it like that. I'm happy with how that looks. So you might want yours brown or something like that, but I'm happy with how this gradient is. And also this gradient stays in place when you're actually taking your renders. So it's a really, really great cell for taking images and things like that as well. All right, so that is enough of the HDRI setup. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up now back to over here to where the world is. I'm going to click it down. I'm going to go on to object. And the reason I've done that is I want to set up now the actual ambient occlusion. So you can see that we actually have ambient occlusion here. The one thing we don't have is it plugged into anything. So we need to actually set that up and plug it into the right places. And then we'll have our ground shadows in Cycle's render engine. Now, the other thing is, if you come up now and basically you brought this HDRI in to start with, you need to go in and automatically pack resources. And the reason you're going to do that is because when you open up this blend file, if you've moved textures anywhere or the HDRI or anything like that, you're going to lose everything and you need to refine them. So it's better to pack everything and then come to File and Save, and you'll see Save Dungeon Props, and everything has now been packed. This will increase the size of the blend file significantly. So we're talking from 10 megabytes up to gigabytes sometimes, depending on how much you've got in there. But it does mean that if you want to send this blend file anywhere else, everything is packed in there. All of the textures, all of the HDRI, everything, all of the modifiers, just literally everything is in there. So someone can just get this file, open it up, and everything will be in there already. You don't need to transfer then all the textures and things like that across. So that's really handy to know. All right, everyone, so I hope you learned a lot in that one, in this one. On the next one, what we'll do then is we'll look at our ambient occlusion setup, and we'll get that set up ready for all of our materials. All right, everyone, so I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.